Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Pensions Subcommittee and Board. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you are not addressing the meeting. Writing "speak" in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions in areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate and hope we will deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Claire, could we have the sediment apologies, and I'll give them as Chair's approval of remote participation for the Pensions Subcommittee.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 4 Pensions Sub-members present this morning. Yourself and Councillor Campbell present in the Council Hall, Councillor Blake and Councillor McFarlane present on Teams, and received apologies from Councillor Hislop, Councillor Dorward, Councillor Dryder and Councillor McGregor. Councillor Thompson currently not present. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a sediment apologies for the Pension Board, and I'll also approve remote participation.
Thank you, Chair. We've got 5 board members present this morning. Councillor Beretti, Councillor Maureen Johnston, David Stainthorpe and Moira Weatherup present here in the Council Hall. Councillor Walters present on Teams. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest for the Pension Subcommittee? No. Any declarations of interest for the Pension Board? No. Now we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting of the Pension Subcommittee on 19th of September 2024. Are we happy to approve those? I'll take silence as approval. Minutes of the previous Pensions meeting, Subcommittee and Pensions Board on 19th September, the joint meeting. Are we happy to approve those?
Happy to approve.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting of Pensions Subcommittee on 12th of November. Councillor Campbell, happy to approve. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 8, which is the Internal Audit Report on Governance and Risk Management. This report provides the findings of the recently undertaken internal audit of the pension fund governance and risk management. A number of recommendations have been identified, with the majority of these already in progress. Richard Fox is in attendance to take any questions members may have. Do we have any questions on this report? Moira, do you have a question?
Well, a few items actually. There's a lot of reference in this report to the governance policy statement that we come on to, and there's sort of conflicting information between what's in this, some of the wording in this document compared to what we come on to, because on page 32 it refers to the, whilst the statutory roles and functions of the Pension Subcommittee and Pension Board are separate, they meet jointly to consider the same agenda. So this document saying we meet jointly, and the regulations in the 2013 regulations say that we meet at the same time. But the policy statement that we go on to look at, the governance statement, refers to the Pension Board being invited to the subcommittee meeting. And that's not what the regulations say. The regulations say we meet at the same time. We're 2 different entities. You know, the Pension Board is obviously an external body to the Council. We're not invited to these subcommittee meetings and can attend or not. We are entitled to have our own meeting at the same time. So I think we need to review that, and we'll probably come into more discussion possibly about that further on. So that was one point I wanted to make. The other point was in relation to page 33 in 2.3. Is it page 33? Let me just see. It refers to significant reliance is placed on the advice of the scheme's investment consultant and council officers. And it goes on to say, whilst this is appropriate, further training may be required. But I think this brings me back to the point that was made during the Short Life Working Group for there to be an independent expert getting involved in this governance review. Now that I understood at the time that the Short Life Working Group met, that we would be getting a quote on what would be possible for an independent expert to come in. And I do think that links to that very important point about the reliance that's placed on our investment consultant and officers. And, you know, training obviously is always welcomed, but I just wanted to make that point because I don't feel that the governance document that we're going to come on to does cover the needs of the pension board in particular. So, thank you.
Thanks, Moira, but can we keep the questions on this item 8, kind of 2 item 8 and not the upcoming report?
Sure, it's just because they're linked. So if this report's saying that we meet jointly, then the governance policy statement isn't correct, and then that's the point that I'm making.
It is actually referred to as a joint meeting. Richard, have you got any comment to make on that item in your report?
On the first item, I think I prefer to leave the discussion to when we're actually discussing the governance statement. But I'd also just like to assure both the subcommittee and the board that we work with officers on a regular basis. I attended a meeting of the Short Life Working Group. I'm conscious the board's constitution will be coming to the next meeting. I will work with officers before that paper is provided to ensure that we're acting correctly and legally. On the second point about training, you're right to pick up on the fact that we do have to place reliance, but I think my nervousness with this is, as we've alluded to in the internal audit report, the pension fund, although it's a relatively small board, it does have assets of £1 billion. And therefore, the more skills that this committee and the board have in terms of providing effective scrutiny, the better. Appreciating that we also appoint advisors, the more levels of control we've got, the better.
Thank you, Richard. No. Thank you. And when you refer to training, I take it you're meaning members of the pension subcommittee and members of the pension board. Is that correct? You're not saying Ian needs more training, are you?
No, I'm referring to committee members and board members. I'm sure Ian has perfect training.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chair. I understand where Moira's coming from a board perspective. However, the audit is really a look at, or observations, and recommendations. It's not as if they're actual fact, is my understanding of any audit that we tend to place. In particular, the one about the training, Moira recommends or suggested that it should be required. Well, it doesn't say that in mine. It just says training may be of benefit. Again, it's another observation, when the audit is taking place. And it clearly states that in the appendix. It says audit opinion. So it's an understanding from the internal audit. It's not actually in confliction, in my view, of the next report. But these are, suggestions that which may benefit the subcommittee. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there is a clear link between this report. There is a link between this report and the next one. But as you say, this is an audit, and the recommendations are basically being followed through. Are you happy that the recommendations are being followed, Richard?
Absolutely. If I had particular concerns, I would say that. So I'm comfortable. It's an audit. We will obviously make observations and have opinions, but I've no worries that I wish to bring to either subcommittee or the board about the operation of the pension fund.
Thank you. Is there any further comment or question? Oh, David, David Stainthorpe.
Thanks, Chair. The page 34, item 2, the audit report, similar comment to the one Moira made. It says the governance policy statement as drafted meets the needs of the pension fund and is in compliance with the legislation. I'm not entirely sure that that's correct. So I think I'd just like to make that point and say that we could perhaps consider that more at the next agenda item. The other part of the document I wanted to comment on was item 12 on page 39. It says performance management information is accurate and reported timelessly, and the level of assurance is good. Now that kind of flies in the face of the fact that at the last, I think, 4 meetings of this subcommittee and board, we've queried the accuracy of that information, and it's very likely the same thing will happen again today. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, have you any response to that?
Sorry, no, Chair. I haven't got an immediate response to that question.
Thank you. Councillor Beretti, are you wanting to come in now?
So I'm just struggling to hear a little bit what was being said.
I was actually about to say the same thing. I think it might be helpful if I don't know if I'm being heard clearly or not, but at the end of the day, it might be helpful if people were actually a bit closer to their microphones when they spoke.
I can hear you clearly, but it's some of the other members or participants are not that close to the microphone. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So could we please make sure we're Moira, David and Richard, I'll just name you. Get closer to your microphones, please. Thank you. Is there any other comments on this particular paper? Moira?
Yeah, could I just add to the point that David was making there regarding the accuracy of reports? One of the concerns that the Pension Board had earlier in the year was when we received a report that wasn't accurate, we knew there were errors in it, and we asked if we could have the report rerun with the correct information in it, and we were advised that that would be possible, but then 2 weeks later we were told actually that's not now going to be possible because it's a live system that's used and we can't go back to the date of when that report you know, had it been accurately produced, should have been produced. So the Pension Board has concerns about what happens if one of the reports that we get presented isn't accurate and we're not using a system where we can go back and get the accurate information. So I just wanted to air that because I think it's quite important and maybe useful for something that could be looked at as part of a future audit.
Thank you. Ian, could you comment on the rerunning of reports? Is that the case? It's live information you use and you can't go back and take a snapshot from an earlier period to revamp a report. Is that the case?
Is this in reference to the investment performance report? What particular information was this that couldn't be rerun, sorry?
I would have to go back and check my emails. I think it might have been related to the multi-asset credit fund. But at the time, I think it was back in March, we were looking to get the report rerun, and it wasn't possible because we were told it was on a live system. I can go back to my emails and share that with you if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Well, we'll share that with you. And can you give us an update on exactly what happens with that? No, that would be great. Thank you. Is there any further questions on this? No. So the recommendation is we're asked to note and comment on the internal audit report in the appendix. I think we've done that. We're happy to agree that. Thank you. We now move on to item 9, the Pension Fund Governance Policy Statement. This report asks members of the Fleece and Galloway Council and Pensions Subcommittee and Board to agree the draft governance policy statement for the pension fund. The aim for this work was to ensure that our governance processes were in line with the local government pension scheme governance regulations and address as far as possible the concerns raised by the pension board. A short-life working group has been involved in the development of this document, and a members' seminar was held on 19th of November to allow members of the subcommittee and board to go through this in detail. Karen Donaldson, along with officers from legal and governance, who have been involved in progressing this work are available to take any questions members may have. So I will open to questions. Do we have any questions? David Stainthorpe.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's more of a comment on the process that led us to this point. The request for a review was made by the board quite some time, I think about 18 months to 2 years ago, and the agreed process for doing the review was that a short life working group would be set up and it would carry on through and report. At some point that stopped and an individual officer was tasked with carrying on the review. We weren't made aware of that until well after that decision had been made. Following that, there was a draft report issued, and then there was a member seminar to discuss the draft report. And there was a bit of pressure being put on the board members to agree with the draft document prior to attending the seminar. The intention was that everyone would agree at the seminar what they wanted to do. The board weren't particularly happy with that, and as chair I had asked for a separate board meeting so that we could review the document and come to some agreement, because what we've been asked to do here today as a board member is to agree this document. As a board is to agree this document. So after the seminar I had asked for a board meeting, and we had a board meeting, and we were going to review and reach a position on the document at that meeting. That was on the 27th. However, the meeting was at 10:30, and I think it was about 10:05 on the same day, a revised document came out. So none of us had seen it. So the board wasn't actually able to reach a position at that point in time, which we could then bring to you today, on whether or not we agreed with this. So I just want to make that point clear, that there is a slight concern that the board hasn't had the opportunity to independently consider as a group this document. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, can you take us through initially the short life working group and what happened with that?
No, thank you, Chair. Yeah, and apologies that you feel that way. Obviously, we did establish the short life working group. It met last January and March, and we got to a position where we were wanting to get some sort of independent review of the draft document. So it wasn't that there was work getting done through that intervening period that the short life working group weren't aware of. It was just, obviously we went through the internal audit process. We had the sort of initial legal review of the document, and then as soon as we kind of had that work progressed, we then reconvened another short life working group. I think it was the week before the members' seminar that we had a couple of weeks ago. And the point of the members' seminar was for the committee and board to kind of jointly discuss the document as was our sort of proposed near final document, to obviously realise the importance of it. There was a lot of interest in it, to make sure that it had that time. Obviously the time in these meetings is quite restricted, to have that discussion. I take your point about obviously we've arranged the separate board meeting to discuss that along with the papers today. I appreciate that it was just before the meeting when the late sort of pack of governance policy statement was published. However, it's not materially different in content. It was just the sort of final legal polishing that was on it. So the actual content that the board received last week was in line with what had been sent previously for the members' seminar. So there shouldn't have been any significant changes in that. It was just sort of tidying up in format and then a couple of slight wording changes, but the actual content hadn't changed from the members' seminar to what's in front of us today.
Thank you. And you say minor change. What were the changes? Can you remember, Karen?
think it was just like the formatting of the document, and I think there was just some legal terminology. It was like silly things like shall instead of will, just because of the legal interpretation of it. There wasn't anything in the actual setup of the governance arrangements that had changed. It was just formatting and slight wording. It was nothing substantial.
Thank you, David. Is that your interpretation, or is your interpretation different?
Thanks, Chair. The issue isn't what changes were made. The issue is that we received a document just before the meeting was taking place to consider whether the document we had was acceptable or not, and make a decision on that. We then received another document which none of us had time to read. So it doesn't really matter what the changes were. The point I'm making is that we didn't have a chance to read it, and therefore we couldn't make a decision at our meeting, which was the whole purpose and intention of the meeting. We were doing our best to support the work of the subcommittee by hopefully coming to some view, some board view on this paper, rather than just having individual views of the board members, which is what you're going to hear today when we actually start to discuss the paper.
Thank you. And when did you get the original document, the pre-amended?
I can't recall the exact date, but I think it was in advance of the members' seminar, if I can recall correctly. There was in the members' seminar where I think the email that came out said that members would consider the document at the seminar, and if there were any changes to be made, they might be put in. The information I got back was that there hadn't been any particular changes. I'd requested a board meeting so that we could discuss it as a board rather than as individual members, and make a decision on what we thought collectively. But unfortunately, just before that meeting, within 20 minutes of that meeting beginning, we got a revised document sent out that none of us had been able to actually look at and consider. Now, we didn't know what changes were in it, so we couldn't legitimately make any decision on the document.
Karen, did you highlight the changes when you issued the second document?
No, it was just the final document that was issued that's with us today.
Well, I think it might have been helpful to, in retrospect, to have highlighted any differences. And there was another part to your question, David. Have we covered that?
No, I mean, I was just giving you that preamble so that when we do discuss the document now, first of all, you realise that it is individual board members speaking and not a collective view, because we haven't had that proper discussion.
Thank you. Is there any further comment or questions? Councillor Campbell?
Thanks, Chair. Just comments, really. I welcome the report. I welcome the changes that's on page 5, paragraph 4.11, making reference about the board that meets quarterly with Dumfries and Galloway Pension Board. Dumfries and Galloway Pension Board shall be invited to attend all meetings. So I think that tidying up, because we've always had that understanding that the board can attend all subcommittees, so it's a joint board and we can scrutinise the paper. So that particular paragraph, I'm more than happy, and I think it's right that we do review our governance periodically. I think that's the right approach, and it clearly sets out in the actual draft document, what the roles are for the pension subcommittee and also the pension board. They're completely distinct, roles in those aspects. So I welcome the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I think it is important to bear in mind that this is for an annual review as well. That's clearly laid out in the recommendations. I'm just going to bring Jackie Holland in, if I could. Jackie, can you comment on the amendments that were made to the document?
Yes, there were mostly typos, grammatical errors, and I think the material ones have been highlighted in the actual report. But if I may, I'd like to comment on Ms Weatherup's and Mr Stanthorpe's comments about the joint meetings and the separate meetings. I think, to be fair, that's fair comment, and there is some confusion about whether it's a joint board or a concurrent board. The report actually refers to the joint subcommittee and pension board, but actually the standing orders and schemes of delegation refer to a concurrent meeting. The regulations make it very, very clear that the subcommittee and the pensions board are two different bodies with different responsibilities. The pensions subcommittee is the decision-making body. It's the scheme, it's the scheme the council is the scheme manager. Pensions subcommittee makes those decisions. The regulations make it very, very clear that the pension board must be invited to all pension subcommittees, and that they must be invited to speak and allowed to make representation. There is also a regulation, I think it's 611, I'll have to double check, but there's also a regulation that allows the pension board to have a separate meeting if necessary. I don't think it says that, but have a separate meeting with agreement with the pension subcommittee. But in such an event, the chair of the pension subcommittee is entitled to act as chair of that committee, of that pensions board separate meeting. The regulations do not envisage that the pension board itself will act as a separate decision-making body. It doesn't envisage that they'll have their own meetings. It is intended that their meetings are deemed to take place at the same time and place as the board. And I don't know if that explains it for Mr Stanthorpe and Miss Weatherup, but that is essentially what we're trying to address in the new governance statement, just to make these distinguishing details very, very clear.
Thank you, Jackie. Does that help, David? David Stanthorpe?
It's helpful in part. The difficulty we've got as a board, the difficulty we've had over the last year or so, is in sorting out the principle and the practice and making sure that we are actually working properly to do what we're supposed to do. So there has to be some point at which the board can make decisions. It can't do that unless it has a meeting to make a decision. And it's not entirely reasonable or appropriate for it to do it at this meeting. So that would indicate there needs to be separate meetings. In practice, we're an odd thing in council terms. I don't think there's any other parts of the council that have a similar type of setup. It's a strange arrangement. What happens in practice with other subcommittees and reports is that the political groups have meetings on a regular basis where all of their councillors will get together and discuss the report and what they think, and then when the person who's representing that group on the committee or subcommittee goes along, they're expressing the views of themselves, but also of the group perhaps as well. We haven't got that opportunity as a pension board. We're a disparate group. We don't have that collective ability. And the only way really to resolve that is for us to have some kind of meeting ourselves before this meeting, so that we consider all the documents and papers and decide what questions we might want to ask, etc., in the same way that council groups do before every meeting that their representatives go and attend. We don't have that ability at the moment, and I think that's one of the things that I wanted to see in the governance review document. That isn't there. Then we come to this meeting, having done that, and ask the questions, get the answers. The subcommittee, quite rightly, makes whatever decision it wants to make. That's not in our remit. We're not interested in that at that point. But after that decision's made, we've then got a duty to consider whether or not we think that decision was made correctly. And again, how do we do that? In this governance document, there's no mechanism for doing that. There's just a vague allusion to you can have a meeting if you want one, perhaps. You might not even be allowed to have one. So certainly my expectation was that there would be a scheduled meeting of the board after each subcommittee, and if any board member wished to raise a concern about a subcommittee decision, they could do that, and the board could then consider itself whether it wished to pursue it, because it's not something for individual members to decide. It has to be a collective board decision. Again, there's nothing in this document about that, or given us that mechanism. So there's quite a range of concerns in my mind about this governance document and how it actually allows the board to do its job better. If anything, I think it actually is a backward step in terms of how the board currently operates. At the moment, rightly or wrongly, we've never had to seek permission to get meetings. We've never been aware of the fact that meetings could be refused. We didn't know that the chair of the subcommittee was supposed to chair those meetings. So there's a whole range of things that need to be looked at in a bit more detail by the board and the subcommittee as well before we go ahead and agree this. Item 1, the reason for the report. This report asks members of the subcommittee and the board to agree the draft governance policy statement. Now, at the moment, the board aren't in a position to do that. So we're happy to have a good discussion about it, but when it comes to the recommendations, and it says members are asked to, now because item 1 says the board has to agree it as well, I'm assuming members mean board members as well. And I don't think we're in a position to be able to agree that. I think we should note it and have a good discussion about all the points that are in it that are perhaps contentious, but note it and continue to review. There is a SAB review into governance, which is having a big national meeting, I think, is it February? So perhaps it might even be better for us to wait till after that. Now, I appreciate what you've said about there being an annual review process, but I'd rather we got it right first time. You know, let's get it right first time, not have to worry about annual reviews thereafter. So, thank you.
Thank you. The one backward step I would definitely consider being not having an annual review, David. I think that's potentially the most backward step. Jackie, could you comment on these? And in particular, whether I'd like to hear item 1 of the report where it's Pensions Subcommittee and Board to agree the draft report. Is that the case?
It's actually a Pensions Subcommittee decision, and there's a number of points Mr. Stanthorpe raised there, and I'll try and remember most of them, and please feel free to come back if I miss any. The regulations envisage that the Pension Board will be invited to all pension subcommittees. If half of the Pension Board members disagree with a decision of the Pension Subcommittee, then the provisions of Regulation 9 of the 2015 regulations kick in. So that means there is opportunity there for the Pension Board to agree or disagree with a decision. In advance of that meeting, the Pension Board the chair of the Pension Board will receive a copy of the papers, and the Pension Board members are expected to sit and listen and scrutinise the discussion. They're invited to make representation and make their opinions known. However, if the Pension Subcommittee makes a decision that the Pension Board is just not happy with, there is a resolution written into the new policy to allow them to take that forward, and they can escalate that as is set out in Regulation 9. I don't have all the regulations in front of me. It would take too long to refer to each and every one. But the way the new policy statement is drafted is designed to reflect the regulations. It's not anticipated by the regulations that the Pension Board will operate separately. It's intended to participate with the Pension Subcommittee at those meetings. I understand what's been said about this hasn't been done in the past, and that they want their own opportunity to have their own meeting, but actually that's not envisaged by the regulations, and that's not how it is intended to operate. It's meant to operate together with both parties having their say, the committee making the decision, and if the Pension Board are not happy with it, there is a resolution written into the new statement which reflects Regulation 9 of the 2015 regulations.
Okay, just for clarity for myself, we've had our meeting. The pension board isn't happy with a decision, and we need to establish whether more than half of them aren't happy with the decision. What's the mechanism for that? I think partly that's what David Stainthorpe's talking about. When do they decide? Do they have a meeting after this meeting, or do they ask for an adjournment during the meeting so that they can discuss it? It's just a simple thing about how the mechanics of this actually works.
The regulations envisage that if at least five members of the pension board disagree, so they would have to make that known at the meeting, that we disagree with that decision. And I would suggest we maybe introduce a process whereby the chair can ask for them individually to make that decision. If at least five members disagree, then they have the right to request a review of the pension committee to review the decision. And the grounds of review are set out, I think they're set out in the policy, they're in Regulation 9. And if there remains a disagreement, if they're still not happy with the decision, they can, we then publish the form of a joint secretarial report on the website for the relevant fund, and that's included in the annual report as well. And if there's still disagreement, there is opportunity to escalate to the Scheme Advisory Board as well, if there's a disagreement to the decision. So the way the process is envisaged is that the pension board are invited to the committee. If they disagree with a decision, then as long as there's at least five members disagree with that decision, then they can ask the pension subcommittee to review that decision. And there's still remedy in the event that they're not happy with that decision.
Thank you. David, could you come back in here just to help me out, because I'm busy trying to understand how you establish your position.
It's difficult to do what we think we need to do within this new governance policy. We don't want to be doing anything or making decisions ourselves, but what we do want to do is to be operating efficiently and effectively. We want to do the job that we've got, and we can't see how we can do the job we've got within the processes that have been identified in this new policy. I'm saying we there. I can't see, because the board hasn't actually made a decision on this yet. I can't see how we can do our job properly within the reference terms of this document. Now, I understand what you're saying about the legislation, and like all legislation, it's not particularly brilliant legislation, pretty poor. I think as an authority, as a pension fund, what we should be doing is making sure that we are doing everything to the best of our ability. And that doesn't mean just applying the minimum standards that are in the legislation. It means doing our very best to do everything absolutely right. So we don't just need to comply with the basic legislation, we can do things better. I think that's what the board's hoping to achieve, or was hoping to achieve when we asked for a review of the governance. We wanted the review to be wider than just governance, actually. We wanted it to look at the administration as well, because we think there's some issues there too that should be considered. But we're focused on governance today, so hopefully that's been kind of helpful to you, but that's just my personal opinion at the moment, Chair.
Karen, do you want to come in?
No, it was just to highlight, obviously, the Short Life Working Group seen some of the benchmarking back in, I think it was March this year. We did do benchmarking against, I think it was about 7 other authorities, the sort of ones that were most similar to us, and out of those 7, only one had ever had had published board minutes. It's not common practice that boards are formally meeting separately, and obviously when we started looking at the regulations in more detail, it became apparent why. Although I can't remember the exact number, but a couple of them indicated that the board kind of got together and met informally in advance of the meetings, like your example You referenced earlier about political groups maybe discussing papers. That does happen, but there isn't any formal minuted meeting of the boards. It was just a kind of informal discussion. Is there any points we maybe want to raise at the committee meeting? But it wasn't like a formal minuted meeting. All the sort of points were minuted through the subcommittee as being the sort of decision-making forum. But that's maybe something that the board could consider as an alternative to kind of make things operate a bit easier for you. I don't know, Jackie's wanting to come in on that point as well, I think.
Yeah, I think, again, what Mr. Stainthorpe says is there's some weight to what he says, and I can see the attraction of that, especially if there's responsibility with those members to oversee and scrutinise the decisions of the subcommittee. But I ask the subcommittee to remember that the role of the role for decision making, for managing the scheme, sits with the subcommittee. It doesn't sit with the board. The board's role is to secure that the subcommittee is compliant, the scheme manager is compliant with the regulations. So although there is some weight to what Mr. Stainthorpe says, actually their role is as is set out in the policy statement, and it doesn't go beyond that, despite that might be the desire of the pension board members. The role is clearly set out in the new statement, which reflects the regulations, and it's designed that way for a purpose, to ensure that the decision making sits with the appropriate body that's appointed, which is the pension subcommittee. So just to quickly clarify, if the pension subcommittee today were to make a decision to accept the policy statement and the pension board disagree with that, they could ask the pension subcommittee to review that decision. And if the pension subcommittee reviewed it but did not change the decision, the pension board would then be entitled to raise the matter with the scheme advisory board and seek advice and guidance and ask for a review of the decision.
Thank you. David, do you want to come back in?
I'm extremely annoyed and disappointed with that contribution. It is indicating that we as a board and I individually have asked for decision-making powers. At no point have we suggested that, at no point have we asked for that. And in fact, we've made it very clear that we fully understand the situation. It appears to me, and again I'll speak for myself, that it's the subcommittee that have an issue, not the board, and the officers that have an issue, not the board. We've been extremely clear, and as I say, I'm disappointed with that contribution that indicates that in any way or at any time did we ask for powers that we're not entitled to. Having said that, this document does not give us the ability to do what Karen suggested would be an idea for us to do, to have a meeting beforehand to discuss what kind of things the board might wish to ask at the subcommittee meetings. And because we are that disparate group, which is a bit odd in council terms, there's no way we can individually arrange that unless it's enshrined in the governance arrangements. Because my manager will come to me and say, David, you're an animal health and welfare officer. You're not going off for a wee impromptu meeting of a pensions board because you're supposed to be doing your animal health and welfare work. And he'll say the same to all of the other trade union reps. The councillors on the board have a little bit more leeway on that, but we don't. So we need that enshrined into the document so that we've got the ability to do what we need to do. With regards to the outcomes, if the board decides to disagree, what's been described is exactly correct in terms of the legislation. But what we've got to ask ourselves is it right? Is it totally reasonable that if there is a really clear disagreement, that the effect of that is that nothing happens? Because that is the effect of a disagreement. If the subcommittee just wishes to disregard the board's views and not consider them, it's entirely entitled to do that, and the board can do nothing about it. And at the very worst, there'll be a little note put in a document somewhere to say there has been a disagreement. Now, when you're talking about spending over £1 billion a year, is that right? Is that appropriate? I don't think it is. I think there should be something more than, as I've said, the basic expectations of the legislation. We should be doing better. You know, we're the Fleece and Galloway Council. We should be the best council in Scotland, if not the UK. We should be the best pension board. And, you know, there's lots of criticisms by government about what pension funds do. And we can offset all of that by getting it right and doing our job really well. So, thank you. I'll leave other board members to contribute if they wish.
Thank you, David. You did make it clear at the start that you weren't looking for decision-making power. Well, I remember quite clearly you saying that. But the issue then goes forward as, I suppose to a certain extent, what constitutes a meeting and what doesn't. Because I think, as Karen pointed out, political groups have meetings, but they're not actually council meetings as such. You know, there is an element of an informal meeting. And again, I don't think there's anything to stop. Am I correct in saying that, Jackie? There's nothing to stop the pension board having an informal meeting to discuss their position. Is that the case, Jackie?
Strictly speaking, the pension board itself must seek approval from the pension subcommittee to have a separate meeting. And as I said, if that happens, then the chair of the pension subcommittee is entitled to chair that meeting. So that's to ensure that the pension subcommittee is aware and there for any discussion. I would like to apologise. I think I misinterpreted what Mr. Stainthorpe said. I thought he said, how do we make decisions? So I think he meant, well, I apologise if I misinterpreted what he was asking for.
I think David's thing was basically the decision as to whether they were happy with their decision as to whether they were happy with our decision. Is that the case, David? Yeah. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Moira?
Yeah. So my understanding, that's part of this governance review, we were trying to look at how we can govern better, because pension board members, and a number of us are quite new to this, we're trying to put forward items so that we can help save the council money, look after our members' deferred pay that's going into the pension fund. One of the areas in page 12 of the extra paper that was sent out in 4.6, it refers to the pension board may require to meet separately on occasion. Now, during that short life working group, I brought to that the feedback that I had received from pension board members was, we would like to have a pre-meet. We would like to have a post-meet so that we can properly scrutinise the documents, help look at the governance of the fund to improve the governance, not for the benefit of the pension board, but for the benefit of the organisation and for the fund and our members. And I know another pension fund, Fife, they have a pre-meet a few days before the pension subcommittee meets, and they have a post-meeting afterwards to consider. And I think that would be good practice for us to follow. And we're looking for approval to have that at a meeting like this so that we don't have to go through a process of referring again to the Scheme Advisory Board. I mean, we're trying our best to govern better, but it's difficult when we can't meet and we can't get into the detail of our discussions at the subcommittee meetings. Otherwise, the meetings would go on much longer than they do. So I would request that, given that there's going to be Scheme Advisory Board governance training in February for pension boards, that we hold off making the decision on this paper today until we learn from that pension board governance training, because we haven't received that. And also there is a referral in to the Scheme Advisory Board at the moment from the pension board, and we wait for the feedback on that so that that can contribute to this document. I referred earlier to the legislation that says the pension board shall meet at the same time as the pension subcommittee, and I do believe that that means we have a right as an external body to meet in our own right, but we meet at the same time rather than being invited to. So the document that we have throughout, it talks about the pension board being entitled to, it refers to the pension board being invited to the meetings, but the regulations say we shall meet. So I think that needs to be reviewed in the document before we make a decision on it. So there are a number of areas here that I think if we can put it off for until our next meeting, until we've been to that governance training, it would be beneficial, and so that the pension board does have a chance to meet to discuss this document, because as David said, we didn't have the chance to do that when it was issued 25 minutes before our meeting last week. So there are a number of concerns that you're hearing from the Pension Board, so that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. I mean, from where I sit, and I think there's value of having this governance policy statement adopted to bring us in line with the local government pension scheme regulations at the moment. But I do take on board very much the fact that we need to have a review, and I'm concerned that we keep having review after review after review, and then we never actually get a governance policy statement, because at the minute, the way I can see it is, we've set up in these papers that we're going to have a review after a year, and it looks like potentially we're not going to end up with a government policy statement within a year. But Jackie, is there any implications for us in not adopting this governance policy?
Well, we're currently not compliant with the regulations, I would say. We're not operating in the manner that is envisaged by the legislation. However, this is how we operate. So if we do not adopt this policy statement, then it will just continue as is.
Thank you. Well, on that basis, I would be quite happy to propose that we actually go with the recommendations as laid out in the papers. Is there anyone with an alternate view? Councillor Beretti?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just in case you wanted to hear more board members speak. I would concur with what David has said, and thinking back to some of the decisions that have been made by the subcommittee over the last 2 years. And what is interesting and what has come out of today was the fact that the chair of the subcommittee can sit in, if need be, to listen to the board and their act as board. Now, I'm thinking about the very last meeting that we had with Hymans Roberts, where there was a bit of an impasse, if you want to call it, as to the decision. And at the time, Hymans Roberts didn't make the comment as to his preferred statement, and I certainly couldn't, because it was not in my position to do so. But with what I've heard now from the fact that the subcommittee chair could have actually sat in a meeting, that would have been a useful point to which to have taken a 10-minute break and say, right, board, what do you think? And I would have been able to say to the chair in confidence, I agreed with him on his choice. And the other committee members could have said what they thought. Single point of failure. We've just done that. You haven't listened to the board, and you've allowed the single point of failure to take precedence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think, bearing that in mind going forward with decisions, I think it would be useful for the chair to consult with the board. I do think that would be useful. David?
Chair, if you agree this today, effectively what will happen is we'll ask for a meeting, which you may or may not decide to allow us to have, which is a bit of a disgrace that you've got that ability in this government's document. If we ask for a meeting, you should be allowing us to have one. It shouldn't be something that's up for discussion. And if we say we're not happy with the governance document, what difference does that make? You're just going to go ahead and apply it anyway. It's a complete waste of time. We might as well never have done the review. This is a backward step for us, and I don't think it should be agreed today. I think the whole review document should be reconsidered. You mentioned we've gone through review after review after review. We haven't. This is the first review there has been. It just hasn't concluded particularly well from the board's point of view, and we'd like the review to continue, and we'd like to be able to bring forward a document which is fit for purpose from our point of view, so that we can do our job properly. And that job isn't making decisions, it's scrutinising the decisions you make.
Thank you. What I actually said was we will have review after review. And actually, to be honest, I think this document should potentially be virtually under constant review going forward, feeding in to when it comes back on an annual basis. my opinion of how it should work. Claire?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, obviously, at 4.11, there's a report going to review of standing orders. Subcommittee, should this be agreed, it may be appropriate in that report to recognise that there'll be a need to introduce a process going forward whereby to ascertain pensions board's agreement or otherwise as we go through meetings of the subcommittee to give the opportunity. So as you were saying before, how do we know if you have board agreement or look at that process? I don't have the answers. I'm just saying flagging that up. And obviously, as with all meetings of the council, there's ability for adjournments as well. Just trying to be helpful there.
Councillor Campbell?
Thanks, Chair. No, I appreciate Claire's, governance sort of point. I sit on the Rosso, and my understanding that if we agree this, it goes to that committee. And again, it's a recommendation that probably would end up in full council. So there are opportunities where, the concerns of the board can be taken into consideration, and these recommendations being passed on to, well, the final say will be full council, is my understanding of this report. You've already suggested that, you're quite happy to approve the draft. I'm happy to second that, Chair. We will get another look at this at Rosso and again at full council on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, like I say, I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations. The only thing I would actually like to say after this is, if there is a further meeting of the board, which I expect there will, I'm quite clearly given. I actually feel uncomfortable with the fact that you ask for authorisation. I'm sure we don't have any problem authorising the meeting, but I do also think we need to reconvene the short life working group as well to go through, just to get this right, because it is, as Councillor Campbell's pointed out, it's going to go to review of standing orders. It's then got to go to full council. A report will be given at both stages. So what I'm offering is the ability for serious input from the board before it goes to both those two committees. Would that be acceptable?
Thank you. I'm struggling with the concept that you put forward to us, because on the one hand you're saying you wish to accept this, but on the other hand you're saying it could be amended. It's a difficult thing for us to think about. The key thing for me is that we need to get this right, and it needs to be a document that allows the board to do its job, and at the moment it just isn't. Now, if what you're suggesting is that we'll have the ability to attend these governance review things, didn't think it was, but that would have been helpful, because the board is a separate entity to everything else, and it's quite disappointing to think that there'll be decisions made about how the board operates that the board doesn't actually have a direct input to. So, yeah, it is a difficult one. But given that you're suggesting that things might be reviewed at a later stage, it seems unreasonable to agree the document now. It would be far better just allowing the review to continue at this point.
No, I disagree with that. I think we need to get a governance document progressing. I do think we need to bring ourselves in line with regulations, and I don't think the suggestion that we reconvene the working group and that we also take meetings going forward, because like a lot of these documents, and it's a much used phrase in this council, is a living document, and actually I think that's what these sort of documents should be. So Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, my concern is that if we don't agree this today, and then, it's legislation, and it's the same legislation as Jackie's outlined, the responsibilities of the board. That's something we cannot change. We cannot change it here. It's further up the chain that needs to be changed in legislation when it comes to that. So we need to have a governance report going to cover ourselves through the legislation, is my understanding. Yes, we are taking on board what the board's concerns are, and again, this could be taken on board again when it goes to Rossall, and again when it goes to full council. So the final document obviously will end up at full council, but we need to comply with legislation. I think that's the fundamental thing, and we've clearly had our legal team is saying that, and even Karen ourselves has mentioned that. We've got to comply with legislation.
Thank you, David. One last thing.
Yeah, could I ask the legal team what areas of legislation we're not complying with at the moment?
Jackie, which areas of legislation do we not comply with at the moment?
Well, the regulations are complex, and I think it's covered in the policy statement. What we're telling you is what the regulations do actually say, which I've already explained today. But I'm quite happy if David Stainthorpe or Moira want to discuss it with me after this meeting. We can go through, I can draw up a list of the regulations if they want, but what we've reflected in the policy statement does reflect the regulations, and therefore it would make the current setup more compliant with regulations.
Thank you.
Sorry, I asked a very specific question there and didn't actually get an answer. We're doing nothing different at the moment from what's in this document. As a basic, we're doing all the things that are in this document currently. We've been doing them all for the last 9 years. There's no difference effectively in what's been proposed to what we've been doing up to now, other than we've been having board meetings without having to ask to have them. The issue for us isn't what's in this document, it's what's not in it. And I think the answer to the question I asked in terms of us complying with legislation is that we are complying with legislation currently. There's no legislative issues with what we're currently doing. This document is all about doing things better, or should be all about doing things better, and it's actually turned into a backward step. Again, I'd like the legal team, they've looked at this document at length, they've been responsible for it. If there's anything we're not doing, tell us what it is now, because there's nothing in this document that's that much different from what we're currently doing.
I think the point is, though, it's in black and white. Jackie?
That's it. It's that we've set out the document so that it is now compliant with what is envisaged by the regulations. And as I said, the legal team have spent some time looking at this, as has Karen's team as well. So there's been a lot of officers working on this document. I don't think this is the forum to sit and go through every item of the regulations and the legislation. But what I can do is provide assurance that the new policy statement is compliant with the current regulations.
Thank you. David, I'm just one more thing then.
Okay. If this isn't the forum where the board can go through this process, where is the forum for us to do that in this document?
Right, thank you. I think that's highlighted with our annual review predominantly. But anyway, I'm just going to move to the recommendations. I propose we agree the recommendations. Councillor Campbell seconded that. Is there anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Blake and Councillor McFarlane.
No, I'm fine with that, thanks.
No, nothing here, Chair.
Thank you. So 2.2, we're asked to agree the governance policy statement as detailed at the appendix. 2.2, note that the governance policy statement will be reviewed by this subcommittee and board on an annual basis as outlined at paragraph 4.12. And 2.3, note that the pension board constitution will be updated to align with this document as outlined at paragraph 4.10. And Karen, could you take us an action to schedule another meeting of the Short Life Working Group? Thank you.
Excuse me.
Moira?
So that was the decision of the pension subcommittee.
Yep.
So do we now ask what's the decision of the pension board? Because the paper does ask the pension board to agree in item 1.
Oh, it does in item 1 ask you to agree. Would that be appropriate, Claire or Jackie?
I think it would be appropriate in this case, because then that would allow us to minute it, regardless of what the decision is. You can minute if they disagree with it, and then that will allow Regulation 9 to kick in.
Thank you, Jackie. So, do we have agreement from the pension board? Do you want to take 5 minutes to discuss it? Is 5 minutes enough? 10 minutes?
That would be useful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll adjourn for 10 minutes.
Time, and that is why I believe over the years there have been 3 meetings set up when this meeting is established, so that there's a pension subcommittee meeting, a pension board meeting, and the joint meeting.
No, there is no other meeting. Councillor Beretti?
Technically, you should be chairing this.
I'm aware of that.
So if you sit there, governance can sit there and everyone else can go out, whilst the board members who are online can stay and we can stay.
Yeah, you've just headed me off at the pass. That was exactly what I was about to suggest. So I'll stay in the meeting. If Councillor Blake, if you could leave and rejoin in 10 minutes, please. Thank you. And Councillor Thompson. and welcome back. We now move on to item 10, the Fleece and Galloway Pension Fund Risk Register. This report presents the annual update of the Pension Fund Risk Register. The initial risk register was presented to members at last December's meeting, where it was agreed that a review would be brought before members annually. This is the first review of the risk register and has been updated to reflect new operational risks which have been identified in relation to policy compliance. It is also recommended that the risk register is now brought before members twice per year instead of the original 12-month interval. Isla Herrick, Kirsty Shannon and Karen Donaldson are available to answer any questions members may have. Do we have any questions? David Staintop.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at this agenda item, and I'm also looking at the other agenda items that have staffing references in them, and there seems to be a disconnect between all of these different. There's 3 agenda items that have staffing information in it. The first is agenda item 8, which shows us a staffing chart and identifies that there is a member of staff, there's a vacancy in that existing staffing complement. There's then this document that identifies that there's some risks regarding staffing. And then there's another document later on which identifies a whole range of administrative processes that are going to put substantive work onto the administration. And yet in that document it says there are no staffing implications. So I know we're on this particular agenda item, and I'm not sure where to raise that point about taking all of these things together across the different agenda items. What is the position regarding the administrative abilities of the fund? Sorry, that's a bit complex for you, but or if it's a bit complex for you, but thank you.
Thanks, David. I think we were talking about here is that we're talking about the challenges with increased regulation and the problem with the resource and staffing. Is that the crux of your question?
Well, my query is whether the risk register is accurate in relation to the administrative needs of the fund.
Thank you. Is anybody can help out with that? Isla, perhaps? No? Karen? Nope.
I can confirm that we are undertaking that resource review at this moment in time, David, and we have completed the sort of initial stages of that, which is identifying the core work, the statutory work that's required, as well as all the other changes that are afoot with the changes in the key legislation with McLeod and the introduction to the dashboard. And we've made that commitment for that to come back to board in March for what that resource will look like for additional resources to support some of those key work streams.
Thank you. I think as well another thing that David's mentioning, which is right when you look at some of the reports, and it is including content, but also terminology and things. There seems to be an inconsistency, and am I correct in you've highlighted that as a potential issue with reporting?
Yeah, it could be that. There just seems to be a connectiveness across a range of different agenda items that hasn't really been recognised just as clearly as it perhaps should have been, in my opinion.
Thank you. Is there any further comment or question on this, Councillor Campbell?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. No, I welcome the report, and it's good to see that looking at the risk matrix, that you know, I think there's only a couple that's actually sitting in the red boxes, but it's quite appropriate that after our lengthy discussion earlier, that the first risk about complying with the regulations, shall we say, and it's good to see that we are complying with the regulations. But just to pick up on one of the points that's already been made about you know, the team, for example, or the number of people that's working, looking at the latest position at the very end box, it says that it's a small team whilst they're experienced members in the team, succession planning and knowledge transfer is required. So I don't know what's actually being proposed at this stage, but hopefully that we can get some kind of succession planning and, you know, so that we can try and sort of mitigate in case that risk disappears into the red boxes. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And how are we doing with succession planning?
Can come back on that. Yeah, absolutely. That's forming part of our programme to review the resource requirements. We're looking at succession planning. The administration team has a thorough development programme in place for all the pensions assistants, pensions officers, so that that knowledge on complex cases and such like is shared amongst all the members of the team.
Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome, everyone. Yes, in page 60, we seem to be quite well into the red and fail to comply with pensions dashboard. So firstly, I'd like to some sort of reassurance around that. But secondly, there's no sense of direction of travel in relation to any of this, because all we get is the actual current risk. It would be really nice if we'd had, you know, previous risk so that we could see direction of travel and make sure we are actually making progress.
Thank you. I think that's an issue with the report. We've got the last reported risk highlighted, but I think what we're looking for is perhaps a map of improvement potentially, if that's possible going forward.
Absolutely, can look into that. Just in highlighting with regards to that risk, PF12, we have made substantial progress with securing the ISP provider for dashboards, and we're in the final stages with procurement to secure that. So we will be on plan to test the system and be compliant for the connection in October 25.
Thank you. So the pensions dashboard is progressing as you'd expect.
Yes, certainly from securing the ISP at this stage, we're on target for that, for testing in the new year.
Thank you. Is there any further questions on this item? Moira.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask on page 52, there's in the latest position column, it says at the bottom, options for procuring a solution to. I just wondered what that detail was in that cell. That's in relation to failure to keep pension records up to date and accurate. What options we were looking at procuring in relation to that.
Karen.
I'll take that, because I noticed that when I was reading the papers the other day, it was to support member tracing.
So, Chair, I couldn't hear that answer. Could you?
Apologies, it was up to procure a system to support member tracing. Just the formatting had cut off the final sentence on that page.
Okay. Moira.
And on page 53, there's reference to a workload tracker in place. I wanted to ask, is that solely for the pension administration team, or does that also cover the resources from the investment financial team as well? And what does that workload tracker show at the moment? Is it red, amber, green sort of in terms of each member of staff, or it would be useful to get a bit more detail on that? That's in the mitigation column.
Yeah, so PF5 is specifically in relation to the admin team.
Okay, thank you. David.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at a different agenda item. It's page 77, and it's got the workforce plan on it, and it seems to relate to more than just the admin team. 77.
Thank you. Just to say that page 77 is the administration team work plan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further comment or question? No. So we'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note at 2.1 the updated Fleece and Galloway Council Pension Fund Risk Register, and 2.2 note the risk register will be reviewed quarterly by officers and on a half-yearly basis by the Pensions Subcommittee and Board. Thank you. Move on to item 11, Pension Fund Update and Emerging Issues. A standard agenda item which provides members with an update on the current and emerging issues relevant to the fund. This report highlights the progress which has been made on the implementation of the fund's updated investment strategy since the last meeting of this subcommittee and board. It also provides the annual review of the investment advisor objectives. There are also brief updates on issues which members should be aware of which will have future impacts on the fund. Karen Donaldson is available to answer any questions members may have. Moira.
Can I just make an observation in relation to 4.11 on page 67? It refers to the resources review. I'm receiving feedback from some members of the fund in terms of being able to access in-person meetings for pension support when members come to look at their pension statements and understanding them. And I know the paperwork that comes out will say, can you email, or we're working from home as the pension administration team. But I think it would be useful as part of that review if consideration can be given to what resources are going to be needed going forward for in-person meetings to support our pension members. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if that was whether that was referring to their admin update or the emerging issues part of it. Anyway, item 11 or item 12.
All right, it was more to do with the resources review. I was thinking meaning staff resources. If that's, maybe I'm missing, is it to do with staff resources, that review?
I think maybe the confusion is there's probably two pieces of work. Obviously, the investment and governance team and administration team sort of sit slightly separately, but obviously both teams are kind of going through the resource and review, and that'll all be kind of brought together at the next meeting as part of the budget for next year.
Okay, so it's probably splitting across both of them, but it was just the point about that the resources for the pension administration who may meet with members. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're looking to, are we addressing that issue, Isla?
We do carry out face-to-face meetings at any point. If a member contacts us and asks for a face-to-face meeting, that will be facilitated.
I wonder if we can make that more explicit on the website, because I do think some of the members that I'm speaking to are a bit put off when the letters maybe say, I'm working from home, can you email? I think maybe we need to communicate that a little bit better to members if that's possible.
We'll certainly take that on board as part of our comms policy review.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any further question or comment on this part? David Stainthorpe.
Yeah, thank you. Chair, we were able to benefit from going to a seminar recently put on by the Local Government Chronicle, and board members, subcommittee members and indeed staff attended that. One of the papers that was delivered was on pensions administration, and it identified quite a number of emerging issues that they thought would impact directly in the very near future on the administrative requirements of the board. If I just go through them with you, because they're not all listed in this document. There was the MacLeod decision, the dashboard, code of practice updates, the cost cap that might arise from the MacLeod decision, annual reporting issues, the gender pensions gap, and associated with that issues regarding how maternity leave impacted on pensions and what might occur in terms of the gender issues around that. Unreliable job evaluation outcomes. Now we know there are unreliable job evaluation outcomes in this council because of the work done by the Chief Exec regarding her senior management team and their pay. And also some other legal matters that have been decided on at court. And then there was one that was a bit odd. It was the historical marriage dowry issues that might or might not come back and bite us in future. So there was a whole range of things that haven't been captured in here in that seminar that we got delivered by a pensions administrator, Scottish pensions administrator with another local authority. So I just wondered if there was any comment that could perhaps get from the administration team about those issues.
Yeah, thank you. And I think potentially what might be useful is, you know, to our next report to perhaps focus on some of these issues either.
I certainly haven't seen that, but I would be very interested to see it and to be able to formulate a response for you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further comment or question on that, I'll just move to the recommendations. Members asked to...
Chair,
No,
just a
David.
comment on, at the last page on the report, it says workforce, do the proposals have any implication for or impact on employees? And it says not applicable. Now, we've just heard there's a review taking place about the workforce needs of this group of employees. So I don't think that's correct in the report to say not applicable. There is definitely a need there for a look, if nothing else, at the resources that are currently in place. And it sounds as though there's probably going to be an increase in staff put there. So the report technically isn't entirely accurate in terms of that particular point.
I think a lot of this is bringing us on to the next agenda item as well, David, item 12 really. So I'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note 2.1, the investment strategy update as detailed at paragraphs 4.1 to 4.5. 2.2, the annual review of investment advisor objectives for 2024, and agree that these objectives will remain in place as detailed at paragraph 4.6 to 4.8. 2.3, the current or emerging issues that will impact the pension fund as detailed at paragraphs 4.9 to 4.15, and note at 2.4 that further updates on these issues will be brought to future meetings of this subcommittee and board as required. So we'll move on to item 12. This is a follow-up report to the annual admin update which was presented to the subcommittee and board in September. Focus of this update is on member engagement and the workload of the administration team. In particular, it provides the further information requested at the last committee re progress work required around Dashboard and MacLeod. Isla Herrick and Kirsty Shannon are available to answer any questions members may have. Do we have any questions on this? David?
Given my previous contributions, why are there no identified workforce implications?
Thank you. Is there the same comment that there's no workforce implications on the assessment at the end? Which clearly, if you're reviewing your staff and resources, there is workforce implications. But Karen?
Well, I was going to say from the previous point of view, I always sort of go with there was no decisions in the report. It was a note and report, so there wasn't any changes to workforce. Obviously, there would be like when we bring the workforce review through in March, there would be an explanation of what the workforce requirement is at that stage, because we don't really know exactly what the workforce is, and we're not asking members to agree anything at this stage. It is just an update on where we're at. It's a note and report. So that's kind of why I had, certainly in my previous report, had put not applicable in that section, just because there wasn't any changes, because there was no real decision taken. But we can take that on board for future papers.
Thank you. Moira?
Just in page 73, 4.1.1, it refers to additional pension contracts. Should that say contributions? Or is there a...
Yeah, I think that's additional pension contributions, APCs. Is that a typo in the report, Carol?
Yeah, APC's additional pension contributions, they were called contracts, so it's maybe me getting confused with terminology, using old stuff instead of new or current.
No. Thank you just for clarifying that. I welcome the information that's in this report about APCs and AVCs, and note that there are 22 members of the scheme taking out APCs, and I think it's 134 on AVCs. Can I just check in terms of the terminology? An AVC is a savings account rather than a pension. Whereas if people are paying at APCs, they're paying into the local government pension their local government pension fund. Is that correct?
They're both pension because they're both tied to the pension regulations. One buys a set amount of pension in the pension scheme directly. That's the APC. And AVC goes to a separate pension pot within the AVC provider at the choice of the member. And then that is used in specified ways, specified within the regulations at retirement. So they are both pensions, it's not savings. It's just what the mechanism behind them, what it does, what it buys, and then what you can use it for at the end of the day.
Thank you. I welcome that there will be information going out to members on both these options for saving for future pensions. And I just wondered, I think it says, is it in January or in the spring that we're looking to get something out to members on this?
We're working with the comms team at the moment to issue something in January when people are thinking about the financial year ahead and what they might want to do if they've got any money left after Christmas.
Thank you, David.
Actually, just on the similar point, slightly different slant on it though. There is there are very few members of the pension fund engaging in ABCs or APCs, and that's really disappointing. And it would be particularly beneficial to the council in terms of the national insurance increases that are coming along soon. If we could get more folk involved in saving for their pension, there's a double benefit to the council. Pension fund members are going to be better off in future, and the council benefits a wee bit in some savings it can make. So I think this is something that we really should be plugging as hard as we can going forward to try and encourage as many people as possible. I'm not one of the people involved, and I'll probably make sure I am going forward from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I must admit, I was surprised myself at the take-up of it. I thought it might actually have been a bit more. So I think you're pushing it going forward's a good idea.
Yes, definitely part of our comms policy, and we will continue to promote it. But it's a level that's reflected across the country. There's, I think, just the very nature of the membership makeup in the LGPS, that there maybe isn't an awful lot of spare money around for making additional contributions.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it as well. But are there any further questions? No. We'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note the update on actions for the pensions section from Pensions Subcommittee on 19th September 2024 as detailed at section 4. So we've noted those. Item 13, the standing item on the agenda, presents an update to members on the current training plan which is in place to support and enhance the skills and knowledge of the subcommittee and board. Karen Donaldson is here to answer any questions any members may have. Moira.
On page 87, it refers to the second last column, training on the 6th of the 3rd, 24. But it doesn't show that date in the column for the fund management presentation for all the councillors and board members. And I just wanted to check whether
Yeah, I'll check that. I'm not sure if it's just been I think it's maybe been a copy across when we added the fund manager presentation table into the report, because I thought obviously it had been missing from the last report, so I thought it was really important to make sure that all the training that the committee and board received was documented on that, and obviously all the fund managers coming in rotation is a fundamental part of that training, understanding what the investment's doing. But I'll double check that, but I think it's just because like obviously FMP is just fund manager presentation, so I think that 6th of the 3rd should just be to be arranged. Thanks for picking that up, Moira.
And it was just 2 points. One was the Scheme Advisory Board, I understand, are going to be offering pension board governance training in February, at the end of February. So if I hear any more details about that, and you probably hear it as well anyway, but I can send that through to you. And it's also, as Unison trade union reps, we are able to go to Unison rep training, and I wonder if that kind of detail should be included in the training report, if that would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Any training that anyone of the committee and board are doing out with the meeting should absolutely be in this. So if you are attending anything else, please do let us know, so that we can make sure that it's made available to all members if possible, and to make sure the training's up to date, because this should be sort of recording everything. So if you could share that, absolutely. And again, I've not seen anything on the details of the Scheme Advisory Board training in February. I've heard it discussed, but I've not seen anything official on it, read dates and what it's covering as yet.
Thank you. Then Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at the record of training on page 86. I mean, obviously, we've had a number of vacancies, you know, for a wee while. I'm just wondering if it'd be possible just to go back round the political groups, see if we can try and populate that. I believe the vacancies may be the independents. If they do not wish to take up their positions, maybe it should be open up to others if they so wish, because it's meant to be a non-political committee, so that, you know, if we can get the full vacancy, it'd look better in the training record.
I think there is something coming forward looking at whether it should be proportional, this committee, given that it's a non-political committee, because it would be better if we had more people on the committee. So I think we are looking at that going forward, so that if for whatever reason other groups don't want to take up the place on it, then really we should be putting it out to other people, so that vacancies are all filled. So if there's no further questions, no, David?
So it's not a question, just a comment. I've already mentioned the training event that we went to, or some of the group went to earlier in November, October, November, and there were a couple of additional things that came out of that, and I think it's important perhaps to feed back on training, and this seems to be the only opportunity to do it. So I mentioned one of the seminars on administration already in a previous agenda item, but there was also other very good seminars on investments and pension fund management, which we really did find very useful, and I'm sure we can discuss at the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, as Karen's highlighted as well, for people doing, as Moira mentioned, unison training or whatever, it would be helpful if we actually kept the team up to date with any training that you'd actually taken out apart from that. So if there's no further... Councillor Thompson. Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies for being a bit late. I was just in another meeting prior. There's been a run of them today, but it was just on the training, and a point made earlier, I think it was Moira and David have kind of made it, but so there'll be training that I think probably is particularly relevant to pension board members around governance, because that's the wheelhouse of the pension board, I suppose. And there's mandatory training for pension subcommittee members, for example. But I think it would be helpful just for board members and pension subcommittee members to maybe to have that clarity around there's training that'll be good for you in this role, you know, as a subcommittee member or as a board member, and it won't necessarily be the same. So I suppose the best approach would be that subcommittee members and board members have got different lenses on when they're looking at the reports and how the reports have been generated and come to the committee. And we kind of need both sets of glasses on, if you like. So, but it doesn't really show that in the training table as such, if that makes any sense. So I think there's maybe something about that kind of external training or governance specific training that could be maybe teased out a bit, just so we know that we've got the right people with the right skills to fulfil the roles that they're on when they're here, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. That makes perfect sense to me. Is that possible to highlight in the report?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anything that's more specific to the board, we can certainly highlight that. As in general, and as best practice, we try and do training to both the committee and board at the same time, because in the majority of the cases, it's relevant to both for an understanding point of view, but certainly like if there's like unison training, obviously that wouldn't maybe be available to elected members, we would certainly record that separately and make that clear that that was just for trade union members. So yeah, absolutely we can make that clear.
Thank you. So we'll move to the recommendations. Members are asked to note to 2.1, note the record of training and training plan for 2024-25 in the appendix, and note 2.2, the updates to the new record of training and training plan for 24-25 will be brought to future meetings of this subcommittee and board. So I have no further business on this particular part of the meeting. David?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We had a small adjournment earlier in the meeting so the Pension Board could meet and discuss a matter. Did we report back on, or did you comment back on that after when the meeting resumed? Because I think it's worthwhile as just having that notified to the other subcommittee members present what the outcome of that was. I've also been, it's been notified to me as the chair of the board that one of the possible requirements that I've got is to ask for a reference back following our decision. So I'd just like that noted as well in this part of the meeting.
Thank you. Just to make sure that the wording and everything is correct on the adjournment and the meeting we had with the Pension Board. As a result of that, Claire, can you give us the verdict?
Thank you. I can confirm the minute will confirm that there was an adjournment to allow a discussion with the Pension Board members only, chaired by the chair of the Pension Sub for item 9, and the minute will confirm that there was not agreement by the board on that decision. And going back to my, sorry, I'm just trying to read my notes. Where am I? Yeah, there was agreement that that the minute was referenced that the board didn't agree to the decision at item 9, and there's also agreement by the chair that there would be an opportunity for the board to input into the report that's going forward to the review of standing orders subcommittee. And thereafter, full council obviously taking on board their... Yeah, and there's... yeah, it's almost like you can read my notes, Chair. And there's also, a provision for a meeting with the Short Life Working Group, and obviously the ultimate decision maker is full council that will take on board recommendations from review of standing order subcommittee for any amendments to the council scheme and standing orders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I still had a bit of trouble hearing that, but I'll assume it was all correct. It was just really to let the subcommittee members know what the outcome of our discussion had been. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 15, which is Local Government Scotland Act 1973. We're asked to consider adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraph 6, part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. We're happy to agree that. Yep. So we'll now move on.